The nurse discovers that the mysterious patient is her missing brother and finds herself torn between saving his life and revealing his identity. The hospital's fluorescent light shone brightly, reflecting off every metal surface and creating an environment that was almost too clinical to be comfortable. It was another day of work in the emergency room, and I, Mia Collins, was immersed in the hectic routine. The smell of antiseptic mixed with the familiar aroma of cafeteria coffee filled my nostrils as I moved quickly from room to room, tending to patients and ensuring everyone was receiving the best care possible. "Nurse Collins." Dr. Harris's voice echoed down the hall, and I turned around immediately, my heart racing. He was the chief of surgery, known for his cynical and demanding stance. The look he gave me left no room for doubt. I needed to be alert. "Where are you in your head? We need you focused. We have a new patient arriving, and you know how chaotic the emergency room can be. We can't have distractions." "Yes, doctor. I'm on my way," I replied, trying to remain calm. The truth is, no matter how hard I tried, anxiety always settled in my stomach when he spoke. He moved quickly, and I followed, his hurried footsteps echoing on the tiles of the hallway. When we arrived at the emergency room, a team was already gathered around a patient who had just been brought in. He appeared to be in critical condition, with irregular breathing and a lost look. The team doctor began to coordinate the actions. "Check the vital signs. We need venous access now. Who is on duty at triage?" As the team moved like a well-oiled machine, I approached the patient. He was sweaty and pale, and his torn t-shirt revealed a tattoo on his arm, a drawing that immediately caught my attention. I had seen that symbol before. My heart raced. It was a tattoo that Jake, my missing brother, wore. It was a stylized representation of a wolf, and I recognized it instantly. "Careful, Mia. Focus here." Dr. Harris's voice pulled me back to reality. He was next to me, watching my silence. I forced myself to look away from the tattoo and focus on the patient. "We need to stabilize it. I'm going to start pain treatment and prepare a blood transfusion," I said, trying to ignore the growing agitation inside me. But Jake's image wouldn't leave my mind. A flashback hit me like a blow. I was just a kid, running around the yard, laughing and playing with my brother. I remember how he always boasted about his tattoo, as if it were a badge of bravery. He had disappeared when we were young, and since then, every day without hearing from him was an open wound in my heart. "Mia, are you okay?" The concern in the voice of a fellow nurse, Sarah, who was standing next to me, brought me back. She looked at me with a doubtful expression, noticing that I was distant. "You need to focus. The patient needs you." "Yes, of course. I'm here," I replied quickly, but my voice betrayed my uneasiness. Before continuing, I looked at the patient again. He was unconscious, but something about him felt familiar, as if his presence were a distant memory that I couldn't reach. Once we were able to stabilize him, Dr. Harris began asking questions about the patient's condition. He had no documents, and that only added to the pressure. "We need information and fast. If he doesn't have identification, it will be difficult to treat," said Dr. Harris, his frustration evident. I knew he was right, but the idea that this man, who could be my brother, was alone and without support made me uneasy. "I'm going to do what I can to find out more about him," I declared, determined not to let this man be just another anonymous case. Dr. Harris gave me a stern look. "Mia, we need you to focus on work, not personal stories. What's happening to you? You've been acting strange since he arrived." "Sorry, doctor. It's just, The words trailed off, and I knew I needed to control myself. "It's just a hard day. I will concentrate." As soon as he walked away, I looked back at the patient, and as I looked at Jake, pain were visible. I knew that life had given us a second chance. I wanted to know who he was. I wouldn't let it slip. And the tattoo, the connection I felt, was like an invisible thread pulling me closer to him. What would I do if he really was Jake? If it were him, could I tell the truth? Would he recognize me? The questions danced in my mind, creating a whirlwind of emotions. I needed answers, but I also needed to remember that I was in a professional environment, and I couldn't let my feelings compromise treatment. The routine in the emergency room continued. Patients came and went, and I struggled to keep my mind focused. With each new service, The weight of my discovery grew. Dr. Harris returned to my side, this time with a disapproving look. "Mia, you need to stop being distracted. Look at your responsibilities. What would you do if one of your patients was in danger because of your lack of concentration?" His tone was relentless, and I knew he was right. I needed to redirect myself. "Sorry, doctor. I'm going to focus on the patients," I responded, even though I felt growing frustration. He was strict, but I couldn't help but think that, in that moment, I was fighting for something more than just a patient. It was a matter of family, of connection, of lost love. The emergency ran its frantic course, and I continued to see patients. But with each passing moment, the memory of Jake grew stronger. The tattoo became an anchor in my mind, and I knew I had to find out the truth. But how? How could I muster the courage to face Dr. Harris and at the same time deal with what could be one of the biggest revelations of my life? The sun began to set, and the hospital lights glowed brighter, reflecting the turmoil inside me. I needed a moment to think, to process everything that was happening. However, the urgency of the situation and the pressure of work did not give me that opportunity. Meanwhile, the patient remained unconscious, the mystery surrounding his identity growing with each passing minute. And so, with my heart racing and my mind conflicted, I went back to work, knowing that every second was precious, not just for this man, but for the chance to reconnect my life with my brothers. The hospital's fluorescent light seemed brighter that night, reflecting off the dim white walls, creating shadows that danced around me. As I walked through the halls, my heart beat at a rapid pace. The discovery that the undocumented patient could be Jake, my missing brother, had left me in emotional turmoil. I decided I needed to investigate more about the patient's past. As a nurse, I have always been concerned about the physical health of my patients, but this situation required something more. The urgency of discovery drove me. Upon entering the break room, I grabbed my laptop and started looking up information about the patient. The name on the medical record was just John Doe, but the circumstances in which he was found were disturbing. He had been found wandering the streets, disoriented and without memory, after an apparent crisis. What would have happened to him? I needed to know. While browsing the hospital pages, I came across a report that mentioned he had been rescued in an area known for criminal activity. My stomach turned. What could have led Jake to this place? I knew he had fallen in with bad company when we were younger, but I never imagined it could have such a devastating impact on his life. What would have happened to him? What if he really was Jake? With these questions rattling around in my mind, I decided I needed to see the patient again. When I entered the room, I found him awake. He was staring at the ceiling, lost in his thoughts, and his heart skipped a beat as he felt the inexplicable connection between us. What would I say to him? How could I approach this situation without sounding like a lunatic? Hesitation enveloped me like a heavy cloud. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual. "How are you feeling today?" He turned his head slowly, and our eyes met. There was something familiar in his eyes, something that made me feel like I was looking into a distorted mirror of the past. "Better, I guess," he replied hoarsely, as if the words were struggling to come out. "Are you a nurse?" "Yes, I'm Mia," I said, leaning closer. "What about you? Do you have any idea who you are?" He hesitated, a look of confusion crossing his face. "Jack," he murmured. "That's what they call me." "Jack," I repeated, trying not to show the disappointment I felt. It was a common name, but it wasn't what I expected to hear. What had happened to Jake? The need to connect with him was overwhelming. "Do you remember anything before all of this?" He closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to recover something lost. "I don't know. Sometimes I get flashes, but they're confusing. Like a dream I can't completely remember." "Dreams can be really confusing," I said, trying to encourage him. "But you're safe here. We'll take care of you." "Why do you care so much?" he asked suddenly. His intense gaze made me feel exposed. "Most people just do the work and leave." "Because I care about people," I said, swallowing hard. "Everyone has a story, and you are important." He shook his head, looking more confused than before. "You don't know me. Why should you care?" "You're a human being," I replied, emotion brimming in my voice. "Everyone deserves care and compassion, especially when they are going through a difficult time. He watched me for a moment, and a glimmer of hope sparked in my heart. What I couldn't say was that he was more than that. He was my family, and I needed to find a way to find out the truth. But how could I do that without revealing him? The night passed slowly as I tried to process everything. When I finally returned home, Jake's memories haunted me. The old photos were stored in a box in my closet, dusty and forgotten. With a lump in my throat, I went there and started looking at images from our childhood. Jake and I had a special bond. He was always the protector, the one who defended me from the older children and who shared his secrets with me. I remember sunny afternoons, playing in the backyard, laughing until my stomach hurt. One photo in particular caught my eye. The two of us, laughing on our bikes, the sun shining in our faces. The tattoo I saw on the patient came to mind, and my heart started racing again. "Jake, where are you?" I whispered to myself, tears streaming down my face. The idea that he could be there, just steps away from me, was both a blessing and a curse. The fear of missing the opportunity to reconnect with him was unbearable. The morning passed in a blur, and when the sun started to rise, my mind was already made up. I needed to see Jack again. I needed to understand his story and find out if he really was Jake. And if he was, what would I say? How would I explain everything that happened? With a heavy heart, I returned to the hospital. The distinctive smell of disinfectant and the sound of medical equipment were familiar, but this morning, everything seemed different. I found Jack in his room, and he seemed more alert. When I entered, he turned his head and smiled slightly, a shy smile that somehow made me feel a little more hopeful. "Hi, Mia," he said, and the way he pronounced her name made me shiver. "You're back." "Yes," I replied, taking a moment to breathe. I'd like to know more about you, Jack. What do you remember?" He hesitated, and I could see the internal struggle in his eyes. "It's hard. Sometimes I feel like there's something really important that I'm forgetting. Maybe we can figure it out together," I suggested, my voice soft. "You are not alone." He looked at me, and for a brief moment, I saw a flash of recognition. "You really care, don't you?" "Yes," I stated, with all the strength I had. "And I want you to know that you're safe here. We'll find the answers, I promise." The words came out of me like a silent vow, a promise I knew I had to keep, not just for him, but for myself. The path ahead would be difficult, full of doubts and fears, but I couldn't let that stop me. I needed to find out the truth, not just for Jake or Jack, but for both of us. And so, with the weight of the past on my shoulders, we began the journey of rediscovery, one step at a time. Dr. Harris's pressure echoed in my mind like a drum, each beat a cruel reminder that I couldn't allow myself to feel. As I watched the patient who, in my heart, I believed was my brother Jake, a storm of emotions gathered inside me. The hospital environment, usually familiar, felt suffocating. The white hallways, with their fluorescent lights, now resembled a prison, and I felt increasingly lost among the screams of pain and whispers of hope. "You need to focus, Mia," Dr. Harris said, his tone cutting like a blade. "We are in a hospital, not an emotional therapy center. Patients need you, and you cannot allow yourself to be distracted by personal matters." "I understand, Dr. Harris," I replied, trying to remain calm amidst the whirlwind of feelings. "But this patient, I feel like I can't just ignore what I'm feeling." "Feelings won't heal anyone," he countered, crossing his arms over his chest. "You need to put your energy where it really counts. Now, do whatever it takes to stabilize him and don't get emotionally involved." "That's what I'm talking about." I took a deep breath, trying to push away the frustration and pain that was building up inside me. With each of his words, I felt like a piece of my heart was breaking. I knew that what was at stake was much more than simple medical protocol. It was the possibility of reuniting with my family, of rediscovering a past that I thought I had lost forever. And yet, here I was, trapped between hospital rules and an uncontrollable desire to hug this man who, if he was really Jake, had been out of my life for so long. "I'll take care of him," I finally said, my voice firm and determined. "I won't let you take me away from what really matters." "So you're choosing your own path," Dr. Harris replied, his expression now a mix of disappointment and anger. Know that this could have consequences for your career. It's your choice, but don't say I didn't warn you." I couldn't hold back a sigh of frustration as I turned away from him. What I had promised myself became increasingly difficult to fulfill. I needed to know if that man in the bed was really Jake. Meanwhile, an inner voice insisted that I should focus on healing him, regardless of his identity. When I returned to the room was still permeated with the characteristic smell of disinfectant, and the soft afternoon light filtered through the window. Jake, or Jack, as he introduced himself, was sitting on the bed, his expression confused and distant. The fragility in his gaze cut me. I wanted to hug him, tell him I was there, and I wouldn't leave him again. But instead, I chose to approach slowly, trying to remain calm. "Hi, Jack," I began, my voice soft and encouraging. "How are you feeling today?" He looked at me, his eyes full of mystery and a hint of fear. "Better, I think. But who are you again?" The hesitation in his voice made me feel sick to my stomach. "I'm a nurse here. My name is Mia," I replied, trying not to let on the anxiety that was pulsing through my body. "I'm here to help you recover." He tilted his head slightly, as if trying to connect the dots. "Mia, that sounds familiar, but I can't remember you. I just feel like I'm missing something." "Sometimes our thoughts get mixed up, Jack," I said, trying to be gentle. "You're going through a difficult time, and it's normal to feel this way." He watched me curiously. "You care about me, don't you?" "I can feel it. But how do you know?" You don't know me." "Actually, I feel like I know you," I replied, the truth coming out before I could stop myself. "There's something about you that reminds me of someone I knew a long time ago." "Who?" he asked, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made me shiver. "Who am I?" The question hung between us like a heavy cloud. I wanted to tell the truth. I wanted to scream that he was my brother, that his life had been a constant search in my heart. But at the same time, I feared that this revelation might make him withdraw even more. What if he wasn't Jake? What if I was wrong? "You're someone important, Jack," I said, trying to keep hope in my voice. "And I'm here to help you find out." He smiled slightly, but the shadow of doubt still hovered in his eyes. "I feel like you're trying to protect me from something bigger. Are you sure there is no more information?" "Sometimes information comes with time," I replied, even though my mind was racing a mile a minute, trying to find a way to connect their memories. Silence fell between us, and with every second that passed, I felt the urgency to confront Dr. Harris. I needed to make it clear that my mission was much more than just taking care of a patient. It was a personal calling, a reunion that I couldn't ignore. With a lump in my throat, I stood up from the bench, determined to face Dr. Harris. I couldn't continue like this, torn between my role as a nurse and my personal quest. He needed to understand that I wasn't just dealing with protocols. I was dealing with a life that could have been mine. "Dr. Harris," I called, finding him in his office, surrounded by papers and charts. "We need to talk." He looked up, his expression skeptical. "About what, Mia?" "About Jack. I need you to listen to me. He is more than a patient. I feel like he could be my brother, and I can't just ignore that." Dr. Harris shook his head, his eyes cold and calculating. "Mia, you need to stop this. Don't get emotionally involved. You are putting your career at risk and the patient's as well. What if he's my brother?" I insisted, emotion brimming in my voice. "You don't understand what I'm going through. He may have lost his memory, but there's something about him that tells me he's Jake. We need to focus on his recovery. That's what matters now," Harris responded, his voice firm and uncompromising. "But what about what I feel? What do I know in my heart?" I said, my voice shaking. "You can't just ignore it. He needs me, and I need him. If you do not focus on your duties, I will not hesitate to take action," he said, his voice cold as steel. I felt my heart sink. The weight of his words was almost unbearable and, at the same time, the knowledge that I needed to fight for Jack, or Jake, grew stronger by the second. The path ahead was filled with uncertainty, but one thing was clear. I wouldn't give up on him, no matter what. I couldn't stop thinking about Jack. With every free moment between appointments, my mind returned to him, his expression confused and, at the same time, familiar. The hours passed slowly, but the desire to discover the truth about his past seemed to speed up time. During the coffee break, I sat at one of the tables in the rest area, staring at the wall, where there was a board with photos of employees and their stories. I needed to know more about Jack, and most importantly, I needed to find out if he really was Jake. I went back to the ward and, while the other nurses focused on their tasks, I opened my laptop. The cold lights from the screen reflected off my face, and I started typing "missing children" in city name. The result that appeared on the screen left me speechless. In the midst of a series of reports, I found an article about children who had been missing for over 15 years. Details were scant, but one name stood out: Jacob Collins. My heart raced. With shaking hands, I clicked on the article and read about a boy who disappeared in a park while playing. The descriptions matched the memories I had of Jake. I remembered his smile, the way he ran with the energy typical of a child. What could have happened to him? What happened to your life? Information was scarce, but the date of disappearance was clearly marked: June 15th, 2008. At the time, I was just 10 years old. The anguish I felt reading each word made me want to cry. I needed to dig up more information, so I decided that at the end of my shift, I would visit the town library. Who knows, I might get more details about the case there. When my coworker, Anna, joined me in the break room, I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't notice her approaching. She sat next to me and, with a curious look, asked, "What are you doing so concentrated like that? It feels like you're in another world." I took my eyes off the screen and took a deep breath. It was time to share my burden, even if I was reluctant. I'm trying to find out more about a patient I saw. He could be my brother, who disappeared when we were children. I revealed, my voice shaking. Anna's eyes widened, surprise written all over her face. "Are you serious? This is incredible. But what if it's true? What are you going to do?" "I don't know, Anna. I just know that I need to know the truth. But what if he isn't? What if I'm deluding myself?" My voice broke at the end of the sentence. She looked at me with compassion, placing her hand over mine. "Mia, you need to be careful. If it is truly your brother, this can be emotionally devastating. What if he doesn't remember you? Or what if he doesn't want to hear from you?" "I know, but I can't just ignore it. The connection I feel with him is so strong. He's like a part of me that was lost," I replied, running my hand through my hair in a nervous gesture. Anna nodded, understanding my internal conflict. "I'll help you investigate. Let's find out everything we can. But please think about the consequences. If this is true, your life will change completely," she warned. The feeling of having someone by my side, someone who supported me, calmed me down a little. I was not alone in this search. I promised myself that at the end of the shift, I would do whatever it took to find out the truth. Hope grew within me, and with it, fear. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. Every time I walked into Jack's room, my heart raced. He was more aware, but still confused. I felt like our future was in my hands, and I couldn't let it slip away. At the end of my shift, Anna and I went to the library, where I dove into frantic research into Jake's disappearance. With each page I turned, with each newspaper clipping I found, reality became more concrete and painful. I found a photo of a child with similar characteristics to Jack. The same brown hair, the same blue eyes. My heart sank, and the pain of longing and hope mixed in an almost unbearable way. Tears started to slide down my face. It was him. I was sure. "Mia, we need to be cautious. If that's true, you can't just go up and tell him you're his sister," Anna whispered, looking around the library. "I know, but I can't just stand here. I need to know if he remembers me, if he can feel the connection I feel," I replied, wiping the tears with the back of my hand. The hours passed, and when I returned home, my mind was in a whirlwind. I needed to face Jack. I needed to know if he remembered his family, me. I decided I would go to his hospital room the next morning. It was time to confront the truth. The next morning, the sun was shining brightly, as if it knew I was about to face one of the most important moments of my life. Every step I took toward Jack's room was heavy, but at the same time, there was a lightness to hope. Upon entering the room, I found Jack sitting on the bed, looking out the window. "Hi, Jack," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. He turned around slowly, and the expression on his face was a mix of surprise and confusion. "Hi," he replied, his voice low and hesitant. "How are you feeling today?" I asked, approaching him. "A little better, I think. But I still can't remember a lot of things," he said, looking down at his hands. My heart raced. It was the perfect opportunity. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my courage. "Jack, do you remember your family? From some point in your childhood?" I asked, my voice breaking at the end. He frowned, as if he were trying to put the pieces of a puzzle together. "No, I'm not sure. Sometimes I get flashes of things, but nothing really clear. It's all very confusing." His voice was filled with pain, and I felt the anguished need to comfort him. "Jack, I hesitated, undecided. What should I say? How could I explain what I was feeling, the connection I believed existed between us? Suddenly, fear took over me. What if I was wrong? What if he didn't want to know me? What would I do if he walked away? "I'm here to help you. If you need something, anything, I'll be by your side," I managed to say, my voice breaking. His gaze softened, but there was still a trace of confusion in his expression. He seemed to want to open up, but fear stopped him. "Thank you, Mia. This means a lot to me. I just don't know what to do. This is all so scary," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. And so, heartbroken and filled with hope, I realized I was about to open a dialogue that would change our lives forever. The hospital's fluorescent light reflected off the white walls, creating a sterile, almost oppressive environment. I looked at the room where Jack was admitted, his face still pale and tired. I knew he was battling something deeper than just physical injuries. There was an internal battle, a silent war between memory and oblivion. I felt my heart sink seeing him like that. The idea that he could be my brother consumed me every moment. I entered the room, determined to do something for him, but I hesitated when I saw him. His eyes were fixed on the window, as if searching for something outside, a hope or a memory he couldn't reach. The silence was heavy and, for a moment, I didn't know what to say. The pain of not revealing the truth weighed on me, like an anchor that kept me from floating. "Hi, Jack," I said, trying to sound casual. "How are you feeling today?" He turned his head slowly, his eyes meeting mine. "Mia, I don't know. I just feel empty." His voice was filled with confusion and pain. "I remember things, but it's like fragments of a dream." That sentence cut me like a knife. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hug him and tell him I was there, that he wasn't alone. But the fear of how he would react paralyzed me. What would happen if he didn't want to recognize me? If he really wasn't Jake? "Do you remember anyone special? Anything that might help you remember?" I asked, trying to guide him but not revealing too much. "Sometimes I see a girl. She smiles at me, but I can't remember her name." He closed his eyes, as if trying to force the memory back. "It's frustrating. I just want to know who I am." The desire to tell the truth grew in me, but the fear of hurting him again stopped me from moving forward. "Jack, you'll remember. I promise." "You're not alone," I replied, trying to convey strength even though I was as lost as he was. With each passing day, Jack's condition seemed to worsen. He wasn't just fighting physical wounds. His mind was in a maze with no way out. And I, as a nurse, was caught between duty and wanting to be the sister he needed. Dr. Harris, in his cold and direct manner, did not make the situation any easier. He was always nearby, watching with a critical eye, ready to point out any weakness. "You need to focus, Mia. What's at stake here is much more important than your personal feelings," he said in one of my exchanges. I stared at him, his cynical expression irritating me more and more. "Jack needs you as a professional, not as a sister lost in daydreams. He's more than a patient, Dr. Harris. I started to protest, but he cut me off. "He's a stranger, Mia, and you should treat him as such. Don't get carried away by emotions that could compromise your objectivity. You're a nurse, remember that." His words echoed in my head, mixing with the pain I already felt. What should I do? Follow his instructions and maintain emotional distance, or risk everything to discover the truth? That night, while going through Jack's files, I found an old photo of an item that belonged to him, a a small necklace with a star-shaped pendant. He had a special connection to it, and it was also something Jake used to use. The image made my heart race, the connection becoming almost palpable. My hands shook as I held the printout of the image. Tears started to slide down my face. "Jake, please, where are you?" I whispered to myself. The weight of responsibility was crushing me. If I revealed the truth and he wasn't my brother, what would I do? What if he didn't want anything to do with me? What if he felt betrayed that I hadn't been there sooner? I needed an answer, and I didn't know how to wait any longer. I looked at the clock. The hands seemed to move slower, each second dragging by. I got up, feeling like I needed to go to him. The desire to comfort him, to remind him of who he was, pushed me out of the break room. When I entered Jack's room, he was lying down, looking even more fragile and vulnerable. "Mia," he murmured when he saw me, and something in his tone made me stop in place. "Are you crying?" "Sorry, it's just, I'm worried about you." Those words came out of me like a reflection of the truth that I couldn't hide. "I want you to get better. I want you to remember. I feel like I'm missing something important, and I don't know what it is." He looked at me with a mixture of pain and hope. "Can you help me remember?" How could I? The truth was there, on the tip of my tongue, but the fear of hurting him held me back. I'd like to do that, Jack, but maybe you need to take a small step. Try to think of anything you remember. Some sight, some sound." He closed his eyes again, and I saw his expression of concentration. "I see an open field, flowers, and a laugh. A girl, she's with me. I feel like I know her." My heart raced. The countryside, the laughter. All of this took me back to our childhood. "Do you remember your name?" I asked, almost in a whisper. "No, I can't." He opened his eyes, frustrated. "It's like it's blurry." "Jack, if you remember, I'll be here. I always will be, I promised," and the sincerity in my voice seemed to touch something inside him. But at the same time, I knew I was just delaying the truth. That night, as I left the hospital, the weight of uncertainty followed me. What should I do? I had to decide whether I would reveal the truth, whether it would mean his healing or his suffering. Hope and fear danced inside me, like shadows that never left me alone. I needed time to think, to understand how I could make the right choice, not just for myself, but for him as well. With every step I took, I felt that the truth was closer, but also further away. And as I looked up at the stars in the night sky, a thought formed. I couldn't wait any longer. It was time to act. The tension in the air was palpable. With my eyes fixed on Jack, I felt my heart speed up as he seemed to get lost in his own thoughts. I approached slowly, trying to decipher the expression on his face. He was paler than before, but there was a spark of lucidity in his eyes that made me hesitate for a moment. "Jack?" I called out to him, but there was no immediate response. "Mia!" His voice came out as a whisper, almost a prayer. I felt my body stiffen. He couldn't be serious. I moved even closer, almost not wanting to believe what I was hearing. "Do you remember me?" My voice was louder than I intended. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to piece together a shattered puzzle. "I always knew who you were," he finally said, opening his eyes again. The intensity of his gaze made me feel like I was being evaluated in a court of law. I didn't know if I could trust you." Tears started to slide down my face. The time I spent without knowing where he was, the despair of not hearing from him. All of this seemed to come crashing down on me. The weight of guilt and joy mixed together in a way I had never felt before. "I looked for you, Jake," he said, his voice choked. "I never stopped thinking about you." "I know, Mia." He paused, looking at the ceiling as if searching for the right words. "I just didn't want you to feel guilty. The life I lived was complicated, but it wasn't your fault." I couldn't hold back the tears. The pain of years of separation and the joy of finally being before him became a storm inside me. Complicated, that word rang in my mind, and I wondered what kind of life Jake had led. "I felt so alone without you," I confessed, my voice breaking. "I always hoped that, somehow, you would come back. I thought about you too." He smiled, but it was a sad smile, marked by a past I didn't know. But I didn't know how to get back. I was lost. I didn't know you were here, Jack. I moved even closer, now holding his hand. I wanted to protect you, but I didn't know how. Sometimes protection is not what we need. Sometimes we just need someone to believe in us. Those words cut like a knife. In an instant, I realized that the struggle I had faced to not get emotionally involved had been in vain. What I really needed was the connection, the truth that was always within my reach. What if I had been braver? I thought. I promise I will never leave you again, I said, firmly, feeling that those words were a promise of a future I desperately wanted. He smiled, a smile that lit up his face, and the memory of who he was began to shine through the pain and confusion. I want to believe that, he said. But life is not simple, Mia. I know. I took a deep breath, looking for the words that could convey what I felt. But we can face this together. Just then, the bedroom door opened, and Dr. Harris walked in, his cynical expression instantly turning to bewilderment upon seeing the scene before him. What did he expect? That I ignored my own family? That I would let my brother sink into darkness? What's going on here? He questioned, his voice cutting like a blade. Dr. Harris, I started, but Jake interrupted me. She is my sister. His words were clear and firm. Dr. Harris's gaze changed, and I saw a mixture of confusion and disdain on his face, as if he was assessing whether this was an emotional move or an undeniable truth. That's impossible, he said, shaking his head, still trying to process the situation. You should focus on your work, Mia. My job is to take care of him, I replied, determination rising to the surface. And he needs me. We need to follow protocols. Dr. Harris insisted, but there was a weakness in his voice. He was starting to realize that he couldn't keep me away from Jake, not after the truth came out. Protocols? Jake intervened. You don't understand. I'm not just a case. I am a person, and she is my sister. Dr. Harris hesitated, but his expression was never one of understanding. He was so stuck in his rules that he couldn't see the humanity in situations. I can't allow you to get emotionally involved, Mia, he said, almost like a warning. And I can't allow you to tell me what to do, I replied, feeling adrenaline running through my veins. The connection with Jake was stronger than any protocol. It was a matter of life and death, not just for him, but for me as well. The tension in the air was palpable, but there was a new strength between Jake and me. I felt like we were finally reconnecting, and that meant more than any job or rules. I looked at him and saw the hope in his eyes. Let's face this together, Jake, I said, firmly. I will fight for you. He nodded, and a hesitant smile appeared on his face. Dr. Harris, on the other hand, was at a loss for words. He simply left, his shadow moving away from what was becoming a space of healing and love. When the door closed, I looked at Jake, and in that instant, I knew we were ready to face whatever came our way. Not only had I found my brother, I had found myself. Together we would face the future, not as strangers, but as a family finally reunited.